So in the environment that we're creating for our sphere, we're going to have light bouncing off the surface that it's sitting on. And most surfaces will reflect or bounce light. It just depends, and the darker the surface is, the less light will be bounced off of it. But usually light will be bounced or reflected off of surfaces, and we'll recreate that in our sphere here. And since it's on the shadow side, remember the terminator is kind of the divider between light and shadow. And since this reflected light, the light is bouncing off this surface onto our sphere, so it's always going to be darker than any tones or values we create on the top side. In some cases, if you have two light sources, you could have equal value on the reflected surface, but most likely it's always going to be darker than the top surface because it's not getting direct light. It's getting reflected light, which is more subdued. So we're just filling in value. It's not going to be as dark as the core shadow because it is actual light bouncing onto our object. And when we do the second pass over with the rendering, we'll make sure that this bottom area is going to be darker than this top area. We'll just have to make adjustments as we go. And if your kneaded eraser isn't getting that edge as fine as you want it, use your smaller eraser. So another interesting thing about light is the way we view it. So if this were a real sphere, we'd be viewing this sphere, and the light hitting the front of the sphere would be seen better than any light hitting this edge. So the edges are going to be darker than this area that's actually reflecting into our eyes. So usually the edges are going to be a little bit darker when you're rendering these top lit forms. You can always kind of count on that. When I'm rendering from imagination, say if it's the figure, I'll try and ensure that the edges are a little bit darker so it shows that wrap around the figure, just like we're doing here, wrapping around that object. It's getting darker. So if we're looking at a figure, it's getting darker as it wraps around. So I'll always make sure these edges are a little bit darker than the area that's getting reflected light as well.